All right. I have been, as usual, thinking about something. But this something, I don't know, it's going to seem maybe like it's not related to anything that we do. Right? Talked about this with students and other practitioners and other instructors over the years, but this thing seems completely backwards in the martial arts world compared to what it looks like in everyday life. And I know we all like to think that we're special and stuff like that, as far as martial arts, and if it was easy, everybody would do it, and all those kind of things. But this is something that, when you compare it to almost any other field, I think it really stands out. Okay, so think about what happens. Right, you got a new employee who's, they're new, right? They're still trying to figure things out. They're working hard. They're trying to remember the procedures, checking everything twice, whatever, right? Um, my dog is agreeing as well. Anyway, they're constantly asking themselves, "What do I do next?" Right? And a normal day, they may already feel like they're barely keeping up, right? Then, somewhere around midday, right? Boss walks in, drops another project on the desk, right? And says, "This needs to be done by end of day," right? And of course, right, the new person looks at it and thinks, "You have," right? They're already overwhelmed. They're barely keeping up with the regular job, right? They're getting frantic, right? They're wondering how they're possibly going to get everything done, normal stuff, and now this, right? So now what, right? Start rushing, make mistakes, get frustrated, whatever, right? Um, who knows? They could even start thinking something like, I don't know, the job's impossible, this is too hard, whatever, right? But sitting a few desks away is somebody that's been on the job for a while. Who knows, right? A couple of years, 10 years, whatever, right? And they look at the same project, right? There it is, right? And they go, "Relax. Hey, calm down," right? We're going to move this thing over part first. We're going to change the order of these things, right? These two things here can be combined, no problem, right? It's going to wait until tomorrow, right? And if we do it that way, we're going to have everything finished by 4:30 instead of 5 o'clock, right? And then they smile and even say, "And we're probably going to have time for another coffee break." So, right? So here we are, right? Same job, same surprise project, same deadline, but an entirely different experience. Why is that? Right? Because expertise usually doesn't mean that you've simply gotten better at working harder or working yourself harder, right? Usually means you've learned how to see the problem differently. I mean, that's been my experience being a consultant in the corporate world, right? They pay you for how you see things and uh, how you problem solve, right? Because if they had that in house, I wouldn't get a phone call, right? But point here is that at a certain level, right, you recognize know what actually works, what actually matters, right? You've developed processes of your own, right, to help workflow and things go smoother and faster and those kind of things, right? Less effort, less wear and tear on yourself in the process, right? You stop wasting energy on things you don't need, right? And because of that, you can often handle a more complicated problem with less disruption to yourself. And that's pretty normal in the real world. And yet, sometimes sometimes. I look at the martial arts world and I think we've managed to turn that completely upside down, right? Um, the number of times that I've seen in classes end white belts floor looking like, well, that was easy, that was cool, right? I got this, right? Someone grabs me like this, I do this, someone that way, I do that. Simple, right? And then you look at the black belts coming off the floor, right? The advanced people. And they're just like drenched in sweat. They've been going harder. They've been moving faster. They've been doing more techniques, more combinations, whatever, right? More effort, right? And I have to ask, if they're the experts, I'm not knocking them, right? I mean, they're obviously doing something right? They earned the belt, right? But if they're experts, why does it look like everything is getting harder, right? Because again, that hasn't watching not only experts or people that have been on the job, while in life, but hasn't been my experience watching the master teachers in this art either. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Priest, right? The problems they were capable of became more complex, right? But needed to do became smaller, cleaner, more efficient, right? Sometimes, and right? Sometimes almost frustratingly simple looking, right? You watch something happen and think, that's it, right? And yet their uke was completely controlled, situation was handled, nothing unnecessary happened. Of course, you go hang out with your training partner or training partners and try to do the same thing, and it doesn't feel the same way, right? But this raises the question, I think every serious self-protection oriented martial artist eventually needs to ask, what should advancement actually look like? What should it look like as we get closer to mastery, right? Is progress really about learning more and more skills and techniques? Not saying it is or isn't at the moment, right? Is it about doing harder and harder combinations? Is it about adding more complexity? Is it about working harder? Or should all of this training eventually be doing something very different to us, right? Shouldn't we be, should we be becoming capable of solving increasingly difficult problems with a greater degree of calm, right? With better judgment, more efficiency, right back at less unnecessary effort. And if that's true, excuse me, my voice is just all off today. If that's true, then maybe we need to very different look at what our training and specific curriculum is actually supposed to be doing. Right? So that's what I want to explore tonight. Right? That's what I want to explore this episode. So stick with us, and I'll see you when we get back.
So, the big question is this. How are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
James, was that kind of weird? Did that speed up, slow down, glitch? The hell? or was that just
Didn't
on my
glitch.
side?
Seemed like it was slightly sped up.
Interesting. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, we are surrounded here by potential electrical storms. They've been off and on for the past couple of days, week, something like that. And we've had, I don't know about where James is. Never mind. You're not that far away anymore. You're near me. We've had some really, really close lightning strikes and things like that. I mean, you don't get 1/1000 out of your mouth, let alone, it's definitely a flashbang kind of thing. So I don't know, maybe it's screwing around with stuff in the system, but we'll see. We'll see, right? Adapt and overcome, as they say. Sporting I call this my bullseye shirt, big old bougie on the front. I don't know, I wish I could get some of these T-shirts that I'm getting. I'm liking the design, but I'm just a big fan of things like that being on the back, and then having kind of like a left breast kind of thing. Of course, I mean that's how we make a lot of our shirts. We have some stuff with things on the front, but anyway. But I call it my bougie, my bouging bullseye. So anyway, welcome back. This is KUDEN Radio, and as usual, I'm your host, Dai-Shihan Miller. Behind the scenes ninja producer, Sensei James Alexander. And again, if you are joining us live tonight, welcome. Right? If you're new, well, then I just filled you in on who I am, and I'm all over the place, so you can just do a Google search to figure out who. But if you're on live, take a moment, say hello in the comments. Let us know where you are watching from or checking in from. And also, you know what? Let us know how long you've been training, right? And as always, right, either now or as we go on, feel free to add your thoughts, or questions. If you are catching the replay later, right? Yeah, in our future, right? Podcast somewhere down the road, you're welcome to let us know where you're listening in from as well, right? Now, over the past several episodes, I think maybe starting back around 314, we've spent quite a bit of time looking at some of the things that get in the way of developing real martial capability. Now, and I've been very, very careful of using that word capability and capabilities over these past episodes because I think abilities that's something you can do, right? Capabilities are what you can do with those skills and abilities, right? And I made a concerted effort to remind myself that I was going to focus on the word martial, right? Notice I didn't complete that with martial arts, okay? Because we've been talking about what gets in the way of developing real martial capability, right? So don't fill in the words, don't flip it on me, right? Martial, right? Of or concerning warfare. Okay? So we're always coming at this from this perspective of the warrior protector. Okay, I mean, people can practice martial arts for whatever reasons they want: belts, trophies. They like Asian culture. They're turned on by martial art, and I don't care, right? My the focus of concepts, and of course, here we are, right, with KUDEN. It's from this perspective of being a warrior protector, right? So, this is going to, as usual, right? KUDEN is going to appeal to a very specific subset within this realm of martial artists, or even people that consider themselves to be self-defense practitioners. Okay, because we need to make sure, right, that we are we're focused on specific outcomes, specific right, capabilities, right? But that being said, over the past several episodes, right, we have looked at why techniques can appear or they can seem to stop working as the problems become less predictable, right? They're working great in the dojo, right? But as soon as chaos or pressure or speed or randomness or whatever, right, things don't work so well, right? We've talked about the missing training methods between simply learning kata and being able to adapt under pressure, right? Went into that much more deeply this past week in Whiteboard Wednesday as well. And then recently, we also explored this concept of, but not simply as 8 directions, right? Or 8 possible answers, right? 8 directions we evade into or whatever. But so these directions that an attack could come from, right? We're facing a given direction, and people have this, I don't know, they can forget, right? That real life is probably not going to be like the dojo, right? Partner's not going to bow to you in front of you. We're not in a sporting event or whatever where there's this, glove bump or bowing or whatever. And so we know exactly where they are. We know how many of them there are, whatever, right? So we looked at Happō from that direction, but we also looked at it as a way of developing the ability to see a problem, right, from more than one perspective. And that kind of goes out to kata as well, right? And techniques and ways of training in one perspective without getting trapped by the first that presents itself or the first answer that we're given or the first, right? So all of those conversations have been pointing, right? And because I don't want to spend week after week simply, telling you what's wrong with martial. We did was that last week? We talked about how even good training can get in the way, right? I don't want to keep doing that, right? Because while that is about clarity and making sure that we don't fall into certain traps or whatever, right? To continue to do that is not particularly useful, right? It's helpful. At some point, we have to ask, right? I can just hear a student now, right? Okay, sensei. All these things are some of the things that can get in the way of developing genuine, authentic capability, right? What do we do about it? Well, there's a good question, right? And so that's where I want to go tonight episode. I want to start talking about the way forward, right? Not by giving another technique or another way to look at techniques or whatever, right? I don't want to talk about or tell you that you need another drill or anything like that, right? Might we? Sure, right? Might we need scenario-based things, drills? Maybe, right? But that's not what I want to do this time, right? And certainly not by suggesting that there's some, obviously, right, that there's some secret advanced training method that suddenly makes everything else work, right? What I want to do is I want to step back and I want to look at something bigger, okay? Just like we did with the problems, right? That's, as we're moving forward and we're literally getting a prescription for ourselves, okay? This is not fashionable. There's Sean Askew just did Relation. James, did you see it today? It was out of one of Hatsumi Sensei's books. It was one of the techniques, right? Where he talked about, the majority of people gravitate toward kata and duplicating kata or just imitating us, right? But this path really requires the application of ingenuity, And so, and some other things, obviously, right? So not just like, oh, look how, look how flexible I can be with things, and right. But it requires a mind that can look at things, and when it looks at a kata or whatever, right, it can look at each individual part and ask certain questions, right? Not just about how to do it right or what other ways are there to do it or whatever, but what's going to be needed to put some pressure on that, put some pressure on the person so that they can walk away that are going to be free. So they're not going to be doing the step kata, right? I mean, everybody's still has their head wrapped around that. Well, then there's a problem bigger than I can help with. But suitable for the street. But instead of just throwing things away and coming up with something, right? You can see, right? You can see the elements, right? And I don't mean the Godai elements. I mean, like, the use of the lead limb in whatever position and whatnot. Even though Kamae is loosened up, even though movement, right, is more Happō like, right? It's more adaptable and less rigid, less everything has to be 45 degrees kind of thing. But it's right there, right? You can look at it and go, oh, wow, look at that, right? It doesn't look like the person went through an entire martial system and then threw 95% of it away to come up with, I don't know, their own fighting style where all you can recognize is a punch or two or a kick or three, whatever, right? Anyway, so, but again, I want to bigger, and then we'll funnel down from there and springboard off into at least another episode, if not a third one. I don't know yet, based on how we go. Because once I started taking notes on this side of things, there was a lot, right? A lot of things that we could do, but I wanted to hone in on big picture stuff first, and then we can move from there. Okay, so like I said, right, let's step back and look at something bigger, right? Because maybe the problem begins not with the techniques, not with the skills, not with the stuff we're learning, but maybe the problem begins with the way we think about progress itself, right? I think that's a question that isn't asked often enough, right? And it's one of the first questions. Somebody calls the dojo for information about classes or walks in, and I'll even ask it again during their first class, right? What is it that you want to get out of your mind, right? And if we're talking about self-defense, what kind of problems are you specifically worried about, right? What do you want to be capable of handling that you're either concerned about or outright afraid of happening today? If we don't have a baseline, how the hell do we gauge progress, right? What does it actually mean to advance in the martial arts? And I know there's ways that we have them, right? But if you've trained for 6 months instead of 3, what should be different? If you've trained instead of 1, what should be different? If you're a black belt instead of a white belt, what should be different? And I don't mean what's tied around your waist. I don't mean how many kata or techniques do you know or that you've memorized. I don't mean how many skills, techniques, whatever that you've been exposed to. I mean, what are you capable of doing now that the earlier could not do? All right. What kind of problems can you recognize? What kind of problems can you solve? What level of complexity can you manage more efficiently? What requires less effort now? 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever, right? What can you see today, or somebody position, whatever, see today that you literally couldn't see back then? Okay, because we're going to talk about advancement, right? I think, especially for a warrior protector, I think those are much, much more important questions than simply asking. And that's why tonight, that's why during explore an idea that I think is to understanding not only martial arts curriculum for those groups and schools or whatever that actually, right? But not just understanding that, but the entire process of developing toward mastery. Right? What does or should a beginner be working on? Other than like easy stuff, right? What kind of problems should they be solving, right? What should an intermediate or developing student be working on? What should a senior student be working on? What should they be able to do, right? What should or how does a tatsujin look at things, or what should they be working on, right? Tatsujin, fully actualized human being. It's another Japanese word that sometimes is used for master, that kind of thing, right? That's the term that I like, because it's not limited to just martial things, right? A fully actualized human being, not perfect, but firing on more cylinders than the average person. Okay, so what is it? Okay, I think that idea is this: the curriculum is the map. Capability is the goal. We might call it the destination. Okay, it's where we're going. Okay. Now, before we start talking about curriculum, and before some of you who aren't instructors decide a discussion about lesson plans, right, or belt requirements, or how to run a martial arts school, okay, let's be very, very clear, right? This is a student issue. If you're training, this is about you, right? Because you should have some idea where your training is taking you, other than Thursday's class at 7 o'clock. And then I'm going to learn whatever the teacher teaches that day. Or I got to make Thursday's class at 7 o'clock because my next belt test is coming up and I need to see XYZ technique, or I need to see it again, or I need to have them check me to make sure that I'm okay to pass, or whatever, right? Got to make it to Japan this year. Well, they don't do the same thing anymore, but need to make it to Japan this year because, get promoted at least once every, got to make that happen, right? But we should have some way of knowing whether or not we're actually moving in that direction, right? And you should be able to look at the things you're being asked to practice and begin understanding why they're there. A bunch of episodes ago, during KUDEN and that same week's whiteboard, well, for a couple of weeks, we focused on asking the question, why does whatever technique we were working on, or whatever one I pulled out, skill, technique, or whatever, right? What does this solve? Do we know what problem it solves, at least at some level? And why does it belong on a warrior protector's training curriculum, right? What problem does it solve? And is that problem important enough to dedicate a lot, right, of our finite, right, our time, effort, money, energy, whatever, right, is limited. It's not infinite, right? So is justify that kind of attention or resources, time, or whatever, right? Um, so we've had, we're going to keep coming back to some of those things, okay? But we need to be able to look at any skill or any technique and even if we don't know, right, begin at or trying to figure out, understand why it is in the curriculum, why this technique, why this particular kata, right? Why Seion, why Shiaku, why Tangeki, why Koku, whatever, right? Well, why this lesson now instead of 6 months ago? Why this lesson now instead of 6 months, right? What is it supposed to develop? What am I supposed to learn from this thing other than a choreographed sequence of moves, right? That kind of thing, right? What am I supposed to learn from that technique as a beginner? What am I supposed to learn from the exact same technique as an intermediate, advanced, senior, whatever? Okay? Same thing with drills. Okay? We have a drill in the Mod 2 curriculum. It's actually introduced in Mod 1. We just don't call it out. I just go, all right, I'm going to string a couple of kamae together against some incoming attacks. I want you to duplicate the pattern, be able to move from position to position to position without losing kamae. Okay? In Mod 2, we call it senundo. Right? It just means linear, implies a repetition drill or exercise, right? And it's about hitting your kamae each time aligned on his center line. So you're, no matter how much he comes in and no matter what he's trying to do, he gains no ground, right? But that changes. Okay. So they work on it, but then later on, same drill. But we're looking at something different. Okay. Because they should already have that other ability. If they stop practicing that ability and now we're working on this thing, we didn't trade things out. We added a layer because now you should have control of your body. You shouldn't have to think about that very much. You should have freed up 95% of your mental bandwidth because that's now easy. So we're not swapping anything out. Now that you have this freed up with, what can we be looking at and controlling to give us not only better ability, but a greater capability of resolving this problem with less effort. All right? So again, right? Those are curriculum questions, yes, right? But they're also questions about your own development. And there's something we give our own students very early in their training that the more I've thought about it over the years, it puts an amazing, a tremendous amount of responsibility, relationship, a student relationship, and relationship. Okay? And it's a part of our student creed. It's one of our life mastery things. It was pulled in from so adapted from some other things that are in the art that has to do with success, right? So before I talk about that, let's just see who's on and who's already engaged and all that wonderful stuff. And I don't mean engaged to be married. That's my stepson. He's now engaged. Anthony, if you're listening, don't screw that up. Anyway, what do we got? James, who's on? Who's already checked in?
So far it's just been Alan, Kyle, and Jimmy.
Oh, okay. This might be, people might think this is one of those boring things. Who knows? I think we get more views on replays and stuff than we do live. But I always appreciate when our regular motley crew shows up. It's always good. Of course, we know we have lots of people that are on the other side of the planet, and work schedules and all those kind of things get in the way. So I always appreciate when you guys are able to make it. So welcome aboard. All right. Anything else? Any questions or comments other than they're the ones that are on?
No, sir.
No. All right. Well, in that case, all right. So let's get back to the student creed. I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. There's just a part of it that's important to this first exploration of progress and successfully moving on and whatnot, right? And it begins with simple words. I believe in what I study. Okay? Now, there's much more to it than that, but I believe in what I study, right? And I want to start right there. Okay. Now, those of you who train with me, or you've been around Warrior Concepts for any length of time, whatever, right, have probably heard our student creed, and you can recite it because, well, that 3-part student creed is required for the second belt promotion. So, because they're the keys to success, right? But again, there are several parts to it. Okay. But the particular section I want to talk with those 5 words. I believe in what I study. And then it goes on to, I am disciplined and I am ready to learn and advance. Okay? Things like this are woo-woo, they're bullshit. They've got no play martial arts curriculum, warrior curriculum, or whatever. But if you know the entire thing, then you know that there's importance placed on 3 important key areas, right? Belief in self, belief in the program, the curriculum, right? The body of knowledge that I'm studying, right? And the teachers, right? I have to believe that I can do this. I have to believe that I am valuable, worth protecting, right? Otherwise, I'm going to quit, right? It has to be about me, not because honey let me do it, nothing like that, right? Teachers, they don't have to be perfect, but I have to believe they know what they're talking about and they're guiding me in the right direction. There should be more than just, they know some stuff. Okay. But believing in the body of knowledge. Okay. We're gonna spend a lot of time on that one. Okay. The discipline part, that's just an affirmation that, or it's an acknowledgement that I will do what needs to be done because it's a part, and some of it's going to be challenging, right? I am disciplined. I am ready to learn and advance sounds like a given, except that that's not a given. Lots of people are like, but I'd really like to learn that stuff, but now it's not a good time. Or they start and then things get in the way, right? I'm ready to learn and advance speaks to more than I'm ready to come to class. Okay. I made up a set of posters that are about to go up in the dojo, and they're going to change out, I don't know, monthly, something like that. And one of them says that your press begins the moment ability, the moment you take a class. We can't confuse those two. All right? Just because we come to class and we learn stuff and we move through array. What the hell does that mean? Right? And there's a reason that the wording with I believe. Okay? Not I intend to. We have one of those. We have a series of 8 vows of intention. And they're not just flat out statements. Right? There's a reason for that, right? The reason that the word begins with I believe is because this is still relatively early in the student's development, in the program. Okay. As students progress, the language of the creed changes, right? It moves from statements of belief, faith-based, trust-based, that kind of thing, to statements of intention, and eventually more direct, right? I train to, I will avoid, period, right? And again, these are part of the life mastery side of things, because it goes back to the question, not just of what we're learning, but who are we becoming? If we already think we're perfect, we can't make ourselves more perfect. It's kind of like being unique. Well, he's more unique. Not possible. Unique. One of a kind. Right? Can't be more unique. Right? Anyway. But this transition to is also part of the developmental process. Okay? We're moving from this is something I believe toward this is something I'm consciously intending to do. I think this is important. I'm going to work on this. Right? Toward this is not just what I do. This is so much a part of who I am that I can't not do it. That's transformation. Okay? If we have to remember to do something, then it's not a part of us. It's a lesson, but it hasn't been worked enough to come out when we're not thinking about it. Okay? And eventually, at the highest levels of development, we're trying to produce something even deeper than that. Right? We're trying to develop these things until they're not merely things we do anymore. Again, they're part of who we are. Right? But we'll save that discussion for another time. For tonight, I want to stay with that first statement. I believe in what I study. Right? Because I've come to see that statement as having two sides to it. Right? I know we introduce it to students up front, seems very one-sided. Students are supposed to learn it because these are positive affirmations and they're necessary keys for success. But again, as with all things, if we keep revisiting, if the process has us keep to continue to revisit the keyhole, not just techniques, right? Smallest elements in the toolbox. Okay. We all grow. We see things differently, right? The original thing is still there. And that's the thing. This is not a substitution test, right? This is not like those martial arts or anything that we could be studying or learning where we have this thing here and now it's not like growing to maturity. And I mean, it's even in the Bible, right? I will now give up childish things because now I'm going to be this kind of person, right? It's not that. Okay? We can see that in life. Lots of people haven't given up childish things. The original thing is still there because it's still necessary. It's still a tool. Okay? But what ends up happening is the understanding expands, the ability expands, what we're able to do with it expands. Okay. So for me, this is expanded again, farther out from what the way we teach it and the way we give it to new students, right? And at this point, has two sides. One side, it is that statement being made by the student. But on the other, I think it's also a promise being made to the student. And that is a very different way of looking at it. Right? Now, I want to be careful with the word believe because I'm not talking about blind faith. I'm not asking a student to say, I believe this because sensei told me it's true. Right? Sensei is always right. Sensei can never be wrong. Right? I'm not asking a student to say, I believe our martial art is better than everybody else's martial art. I don't have to say that. Not because I believe that it's better than everybody else's martial art. We'll do that automatically. As soon as we're doing something, we automatically believe that this is the shit and everybody else is wrong. The fact that they all win fights or defend themselves or whatever, or at least a good percentage of them do, and the fact that these things have survived centuries, I'm going to say there's a problem with that belief, right? I'm also not asking a student to say, I believe every technique I'm learning is guaranteed to work exactly the way I practiced it. It's not what I'm talking about, right? It's not what I'm talking about. Remember, when the student is being introduced to this portion of the creed, they've generally been training. Well, they were given it right up front, right? But by the time they're tested on, can they recite it? Do they know it? Because they're going to keep working on it for a while, right? But I consider that first 2 months, right, as that introductory period. They're working with it. We're discussing it, that kind of thing, right? So this introductory period, like I said, 2 months, maybe 3 months, right? Something like that. So they've already had experiences, right? They've learned some basic skills, right? They've practiced some simple self-protection situations, that kind of thing, right? They probably discovered that there are things that they couldn't do when they walked through the door. Confidence is up. Yeah, so it's frustration and confusion because, they still have to work out some issues and all that. But either way, right? But the point here is that they've had a chance to explore the logic of what we're teaching, right? And if they're not blinded by the awe of, well, now I get to train in the martial arts, and ooh, Sensei's got that level of black belt. Look how amazing he is. Or ninjutsu's the shit, or Bujinkan, or whatever, right? If that hasn't, hopefully, if that hasn't happened, or if it's been like quelled a little bit, right? They've had a chance to compare this to what they've seen, what worries them, what bothers them, right? What if somebody grabs me this way, whatever, right? So getting to understand, right, how the logic of like getting somebody off of them more easily, right? Being harder to hit, that kind of thing, right? They've definitely started to learn like how to fall without automatically putting a hand out and potentially breaking a wrist or something like that, right? They've started to understand distance, position, kamae, awareness, right? Whatever those early lessons happen to be, right? So they have some evidence, right? And that's because now when they say, I believe in what I study, they're not saying, I blindly believe everything Sensei tells me. At least I freaking hope so. Hope not. Not in my dojo, right? Some of my guys already know. I'll shut that down quickly, right? Because in the next, as soon as they tell me, Sensei's never, then I'll lie to them. Just add a hat, right? So be a grown-up. Think for yourself, right? Make sure that this is giving you what you want and not, I don't know, some fantasy script for whatever. Okay. But at this point, they're saying, when they use that phrase, I believe in what I study, they're saying something closer to I've experienced so far. I have reason to believe that continuing along this path can take me somewhere useful. It's going to give me some abilities that I came here for. Okay. I surrender my rational mind, my logic, my belief about the way people punch or whatever, right? Even if we're punching differently, right? It's been explained. Okay, look, this later on in the advanced levels, even if this guy throws a hook punch, just straighten out if we do things a certain way. Okay, not because we force him to punch straight. Physics will straighten out the arm for us. But for now, It's way too many different punches. So what we're going to do is position yourself and control distance. So jabs are really, really, really hard. Not that you don't have to worry about them, but here's your first lesson in making it harder for somebody to just throw you with a jab, throw a jab at you, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to control that distance. So he has to step to get at you. If he really wants you, he has to do this. Okay. Yeah, but what if he doesn't? Got to deal with that in mod 2 and mod 3. For now, let's give you some workable things. Okay, we're not at this point not training to defend against killers. We're training to defend against somebody that's okay. They're not, but they are having a moment, right? And so what we have to understand is how to make freedom. So your first 2 goals are to learn how to be harder to hit and hard to hold on to for more than a second or 3. Fair? Cool, right? So that's very different, right? And I've tested a little bit of it, right? This is from again, this is still the student's perspective, right? I've tested a little bit of it. I've experienced a little bit of success, right? I've seen some change in myself, right? The number one answer that students give during tests as to what's the biggest thing you think you've gotten out of training since you started, right? Or what's one thing that you have done to increase your own personal safety? We have these kind of questions in our testing process. And the number one answer from adults is increased awareness. That's huge, right? But they've gotten these benefits out of this, right? So the logic is, I have seen some change, some abilities, and I've seen some change in myself. And so I have every reason to assess enough to keep going. Okay. So I know I've got some folks that are on that are actually in the program. Jimmy does kung fu, and I know he does ninjutsu and whatever. But so some are directly connected to the program, others are not, or whatever. But think back to when you first started training, right? Not necessarily with me, right? Wherever you began, okay? What was the first thing that made you think, okay, there's something here, right? There's something, yeah, this is important, right? I need to get this, okay? Was there a particular technique? Was there, I don't know, an aha moment, a realization, right? Was it something that somebody showed you? Like one of my guys, he's the big 375, 6'5" student that I was out. Everybody needs a Tim in their training, just stuff whether you, as to whether you know it or not. Because if you can't break that person's balance, then pressure and size and whatnot are going to be difficult, right? But Tim came in originally. He worked in or near my wife in this one hospital. And when he came in, he was interested, but some experience. Tim was an Army combat veteran, behind a gun and otherwise. And so part of Tim's mentality was also, and there was a class, and he always reminded the class where he posed a question about, what was the question about, given, like, what if the guy's too big or too fast, or your context. But this is Tim's like moment, his oh, yeah, this is good, right? You know, what do I do if things are like that, right? And I simply looked at the person and said that I wouldn't do this technique. It's not designed for that. All your techniques are designed to solve. They're not the catch all to be all. That was Tim's moment. Nobody's trying to blow smoke about it, right? This was going to require more than just learning some cool moves, knowing some names of those cool moves and that kind of stuff, right? But anyway, right? You, right? Maybe it was the first time something worked that you didn't expect to work, right? Maybe it wasn't even physical. Who knows, right? Maybe it was the first time somebody explained danger, awareness, discipline, conflict, whatever, in a way that suddenly made sense to you, right? So whatever it was, right? Drop that in the comments. I'd really be interested to see what some of those early moments were for you, okay? Because those moments matter, right? They do. That's where belief begins becoming something more than simply accepting somebody else's claim, right? It's becoming supported by evidence, right? And while you're doing that, let's talk about the other side of the promise, okay? Because here's where I've come to look at this differently, right? Not as a senior practitioner, not as a student, but as a teacher, okay? If I'm going to hand a student a creed that has this on it, right? And I'm going to ask them to learn this thing, right? Think about it, understand it, right? And eventually be able to say, I believe in what I study, then I have an obligation too. Okay? This is one of those things that I believe wholeheartedly, just like I believe that martial arts instructors and students alike need to put more thought into the fact that this is not like learning even something like swimming or how to ride a bike, or it's not like learning, decoupage or paint by number or whatever, right? I mean, this is something where when a student comes to a teacher, that student is not just figuratively, but literally putting their life in that teacher's hands. And it will remain in that teacher's hands until that student develops the ability to do not techniques. That student has the capability of protecting themselves and others to the degree that the teacher, assuming that the teacher already can. Okay, not just assume that everybody with a black belt can pull it off. What black belt means any more than a college degree means that your work ethic and your ability to be successful in a given role is a foregone conclusion. Doesn't mean that. It means that you went through some courses, you learned some stuff, you've passed tests on proficiency, and here you go. That's all that means. Okay? Let's not confuse it with meaning anything else. But just as much as I believe that students are putting their lives in my hands, and I have an obligation to that, I have an obligation to this as well. Okay? That I believe in what I study, right? For them to be able to say that, I have to be presenting things in a way to the best of my ability, right? There's that obligation, right? Because what I'm giving them to study had damn well better be worthy of that belief. Okay? That's the other side of this. Okay? And I don't mean that I have to guarantee that nothing will ever go wrong. I can't guarantee that. Nobody can. I can't guarantee that with the rank I have or Hasumi Sensei or whatever, right? I mean, look, death's going to take him soon. Old age is still there. He had stomach cancer early on. And his earliest students, who are now Soke and some of didn't know if he was going to survive. Right? That was a long time ago. But there's no guarantees in life. Right? I can't guarantee that every self-defense technique will work perfectly against every human being under every possible condition. Nobody can. Okay? I can't guarantee that somebody who trains for 6 months is going to be able to handle every conceivable act of violence. And I don't pretend to. Okay? Because that would be ridiculous. Right? I don't want my students to be deluded. So I have an obligation to make sure that I pass on my non-delusional state about what situations are really like and what kind of monsters are actually out there. And to remind them on a consistent basis, regardless of their belt level. And again, as the belt level goes up, right? We're not here to train to be invincible. It's impossible. We have human bodies. Okay? But what I can promise is that there should be a reason we're doing what we're doing. Right? There should be a reason, hopefully more than one, that any particular lesson is here. It's not here just because. It's not just here because it's in the scrolls. It's not just here because it's Bujinkan. It's not just here because it's, okay? There should be a reason this technique is here. There should be a reason we're doing this drill again, still, right? There should be a reason you're learning this now rather than later, or that you'll be learning this thing you're asking me about later rather than now. And all of those things should be contributing towards something very specific. Right? They should be helping develop the person I'm training can help you become. How do I know that? Because it has helped me and my peers and my teachers to go from beaten, broken, unknowing, unsure, whatever, right? To this thing. Because otherwise, what exactly am I asking you to believe in? A collection of techniques? My personality? Right? A tradition? A belt system? Right? A bunch of things somebody told me I was supposed to teach because somebody told them they were supposed to teach them? Okay? That's not enough for me. Okay? If I'm telling a student, follow this path, then I better have a really good fucking idea about where that path goes, other than just accumulating shit that has no value except for ego stroking, unless we're capable of using it against the problems it was designed to solve. Anyway, that's why the next part of that creed becomes so important, right? We start off with, I believe in what I study. But then the next line, I am disciplined. Okay? I hope so, because that's part of what makes a good student, right? I will do what is necessary, what's in the process, no matter how fucking difficult it is, because it's part of the process and needs to be done. Okay? But then there's the I am ready to learn and advance, right? Advance. That's an interesting word. Advance toward what? Think about that. Because in the martial arts, we have a very easy answer available to us, right? Next. Well, you're a yellow belt now, so blue belt. After that's orange belt, or whatever the system is that you're going through, okay? But that's not really an answer, okay? That's not a capability, right? You don't become a piece of cloth. That's just the name we gave the next marker. Okay? What happens after blue? Orange, green. Okay, then what? Right? Then what? Brown? Then what? Black? Okay, all right. Kind of seeming redundant, right? But what is exactly happening to the person? How is this any different than stamp collecting? And licking something and stick it in a book. All right, fair enough. What does green belt mean? What does purple sash mean? Whatever, right? If I tell you that you advance from one rank to another, what does that tell me, or you for that matter, what you're now capable of doing? See, and that's the question that interests me. Because I can teach you more things. That's easy. I can give you another technique, another kata, another weapon, another drill, right? I can make the material more complicated. I can make the attack faster. I can make you sweat more. But none of those things by themselves necessarily prove that I've developed greater capability in you. And that's where I think we need to distinguish between two ideas that often get treated as though they're the same thing. We've talked about this in the limitations. Some of these things have to carry over. Okay. Those two things are accumulation and development. Okay? Accumulation says what? I know more. I have more. Development asks, what can I do I couldn't do before? And naming off that I remembered the moves and don't forget them. And maybe even more importantly, what can I handle now that the earlier version of me couldn't handle? That's a very, very different measure of progress. You who do teach, I think this question gets even more serious because it's extraordinarily valuable. They're giving us their time. They're giving us their effort. They're giving us their trust. And they're giving us something they can never replace. Months or years of their life. Think about that. Right? People complain because students quit. So some of the reasons that they don't. And maybe they're not a quitter, so they wouldn't quit no matter how boring, challenging, redundant, whatever things get. Right? But if they're not dojo hopping, if they're not art hopping, if they're not dabbling, if they didn't just like arts pool and then decided, well, that was cool, that was enough, right? They're sticking around. Think about that, right? I mean, really think about that. If somebody trains with me for 5 years, I can't give them those 5 years back and say, sorry, the process didn't really go anywhere, right? They to get them somewhere, to take them somewhere, to help specific capability problems. Okay, right? I need to only what I'm teaching during this class, right? I should understand what tonight's lesson is supposed to contribute to 6 months from now at black belt and beyond black belt. That's curriculum, not what technique am I Tuesday night. What technique am I teaching to somebody who's a blue belt or is brand new into module 3 as an orange belt? It should be, what am I developing in this person? And why does this particular lesson belong at this particular point in that development. Because really good students, they're going to trust the teacher, right? They're going to learn it because and especially in the West, coming out of the Western academic system, they're going to learn it because you told them they needed to learn it. And if everybody's in agreement, right? Well, be able to show me this technique to get your next belt. Okay. Right? It's like, sorry guys, that's like training a dog. Do what you taught it to do because you're going to give it a damn. You're not going to yell at it or swat it with a freaking newspaper. It has no clue. It's just going to do it. Does get a treat. Okay. Connection yet that if we get this wrong and the focus is on the treats that just have martial arts belts or certificates or whatever, we may be completely missing the capabilities we need to not get beaten, broken, or killed, or to be able to save somebody else from being beaten, broken, or killed. We could have gone through the entire process and not be that much better off. But we sure do feel good about the treats we got. Okay. And this is why I don't think curriculum should simply be understood as a list of belt requirements. Okay. So again, let me pause here. James, any questions, comments coming in about this idea of belief, trust, accumulation versus development? Anything we've covered so far?
The only thing is Alan said using less energy, relaxing instead of burning more energy by being so tense or stiff.
Cool. See, that's a capability, right? The ability to not just, I mean, anybody can like sit down and go, I'm using less energy. Yeah. You're right. You are, right? But the capability is, can I do that when I'm doing other things that typically require more energy? Because if we're really developing a capability, we need to be studying how much is too much, how much is too little. Because God knows in this martial art, man, we beat the hell out of the word relax, don't we? Right? Relax, being relaxed, and being more relaxed. Okay. And then they show up for, I don't know, an orange belt thing, or we're doing some sparring or whatever. And I have to ask them if they're like on Benadryl or, you know, sharing a Quaalude with somebody or something, because they're just way too, you know, did you hit a doobie before you came to class? By the way, don't do any of those things because you can't come to my classes. But my point is, now you're too fucking relaxed. Okay? Because this is not like a light switch. It's not on or off. Right? It's, can you control it? My daughter Trinity was just in class tonight, and she's in mod 4. And so having her work on this concept of, it's not about relaxation, because to do anything, we have to fire certain muscles. We just conventionally call that tension. We have to tense certain muscles. What we're talking about in the beginning, when we tell people to relax, is you're too freaking tense, right? You're bracing. You're causing the body to brace, to limit itself, which slows it down. Those kind of things, right? You go through the static stop, whatever, right? And so she's in mod 4, getting ready to move to mod 5, which is prep for not just Shodan, but also Nidan. Okay. And so now it's not a game of relaxation. She needs to be figuring out when tension should occur. Okay. What gets relaxed while something else gets tensed? She just discovered a couple of those things tonight where during a strike, I said, you relax into it, just like gravity have the arm, right? Doing nothing. right? And then at that moment, just before impact, right, there's this tension. But tonight she got it because she asked the right question. What am I tensing? And I said, the muscles necessary to make that fist. So it's structurally sound when it hits. And she went, oh, because she tried it and she did it. And she's like, that makes the entire time that she's been trying to do this. When it came to the tension part, she was tensing the entire muscle structure here all the way down the arm and couldn't relax it immediately after the strike because it's supposed to be relaxed, tensed, relaxed again. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you tense the entire chain, it's not untensing. So I need to be able to do something that is the smallest piece possible. Finally made sense, right? Just a completely different kind of approach to it. But yeah, so Alan's big thing was relax, right? So as Alan's continuing to work on this fire element, Alan needs bursts of power, burst of directed energy. I'm a graduate of the Zen monks relaxation into water class of Thursday at 3:00, right? Or I think I took too many Benadryl Sensei. My sneezing stopped, but now I'm talking like this. Yeah, okay. Probably not. You're probably asleep in your comfy chair. But anyway, since he typed something in, at least when he typed it in, we know that he's not, right? At that moment in time, he was not. And it's not misspelled, so he wasn't drifting either. So it's all good. Okay. Anyway, anybody else? Anything else?
Question just came in from
Sure.
Are you proposing then that curriculum, while describing techniques, should also describe how a person has developed in the working of those techniques the concept of becoming or finding purpose, a tatsujin?
Well, the curriculum is going to change and update. I used an analogy, I think it was last week, and I've used it before, about a fit person being able to help somebody who's not fit get fit, right? They're going to give them a process. Okay. So we could see that as a curriculum, right? Do these exercises, do this number of reps for each one, this weight, whatever, right? Whatever, eat, sleep, breathe, whatever, this way or whatever. And there's a good likelihood that person's going to get there. Okay. And that's fine, right? This person, this fit person, we call them personal trainers, call them whatever you want, right? They're able to get these other people at a lower level, right? To this level. Now, whether the person gets there or not is also highly dependent on this person's discipline, which is why it's in the fucking student creed. Anyway, pardon my language. Anyway, so, right. But if this person wants to go to another level, the curriculum that they've been giving, the process they've been giving other people to get to this level can't get them there. But the way most people are acting in the martial arts is, if I want to get to this level, I just do this more, faster, and harder. James, you've been in curriculum like that, right? I've been in curriculum like that way back in the day. Not in this art, but right. Just do more of it, do it faster, do it harder, do kata that have more moves in it. What else is in there? I don't know. Instead of being able to do 10 push-ups, you have to be able to do 300 push-ups or whatever. I mean, it's an accumulation thing. So I'm going to answer that question with a simple yes, but also I'm going to dive into that much more deeply as we go. Okay. I will not be able to cover everything during this one, but what else, James?
That's it for right now.
Cool. All right. You have anything to throw on top of this, Monkey? Like when it comes to curriculum and what you encountered coming into this, because you came from Taekwondo. You were an instructor, right? Black belt instructor, Taekwondo, that kind of thing. And you've done some other things. what was different? Because for a lot of people, when they go into another martial art, they're either looking to fill in gaps or they're looking to learn more, right? Anything stand out for you? Do you remember the transition thing, or the thing that, because you traveled quite a bit, right? Come to class, right? To train
Yeah, I
with me.
think it was um,
You were traveling what, 45 minutes to an hour?
an hour.
An
It was right
hour?
about an hour. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd travel 2 hours round trip to come to class for an hour or two. That's a chunk out of
Usually
your
2 hours.
friggin' day. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just doing it for a long time, and then I was through a couple different schools. The first one was supposed to be like super self defense oriented, but as we've talked about before, but it was still, class was broken into chunks, and nothing like looked like it was non correlated. Like there's a self defense part, but it had nothing to do with what drills were or sparring
And it
was or
didn't look like
anything.
what you were used to seeing on the street when you were like, I think I might need to learn something.
Yeah, so because I had jumped over to more competitive style, because even back then, before UFC is what it is now, it was, you have to like spar and be
Yeah.
competitive to
Yeah.
to test things. And then I did that for a while. I was moderately successful with it, but then I started like with the internet, like CCTV footage and things started coming out, and I'm like, that doesn't look anything like this. This like the math isn't adding up here. So that's when I started looking at other stuff, because um, like I started taekwondo when I was younger. I was getting older, getting out of school, moving into other things, and so I was just these things don't look the same, and I want to be prepared for that. But
Yeah.
it's not adding up to what's in the quote unquote ring and everything.
Yeah.
Full contact or not.
And I was that all these classes just bleed together, and maybe I'm just getting old. But was it this past week? Yeah, maybe it was this past week when I was talking about like in Whiteboard Wednesday, right? I set things up, and I think we even did it partly in KUDEN too, where we kata on one side and sparring on the other.
Mm.
But there's stuff that there's capabilities that neither of these develop, right? The sparring side, works well for somebody who's intuitive and whatnot, but it also puts a lot of pressure on the person. And if these techniques weren't put into context or developed in a certain way, probably they're not coming out over here. And what the person is left with is whatever their own ingenuity or their own understanding is going to produce. And what that usually produces is a stripping away of most of what they learned, which to me was a hellacious waste of time, effort, money, whatever, right? But then there's the kata stuff, which any reasonably minded person is going to be like, well, fights don't happen that way, right? I mean, there's no way that I'm going to use a step-by-step choreographed thing. And if I do, it's going to be like a 1 in a million kind of thing, right? So it's not about that, right? So the whole thing last week was about this whole area in here, right? And that's where these drills and things like that come into. As a matter of fact, I just surprised somebody last week we started off with our mod 2, right? Senundo, zigzag kind of thing. One come on, one come on. So we're just moving diagonally, and the bad guy has to chase us, but every time he moves, he gets nothing else. And then what we did was this on Friday? Who was in class on Friday? Alan, Kyle, Trin wasn't there. But what I did was I had the bad guy start this way. And then what they did was they just went burn, 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 right? And of course, the student could adjust the speed, right? Just tell your partner to slow down, whatever, because the brain has to kind of catch up. But what the partner was doing wasn't ski, right? It was, they immediately started just reaching out, and it was pats to the cheek, right? And so now the student who has learned one form of it, but they've also learned shuffling steps, right? Now, my partner is able to come in at a particular rhythm, at a particular speed, and there's consequences. Moving from a static start or a static point to a 45-degree angle against one punch, and then he's going to be nice enough to wait to throw the next thing, or he's going to stand there while I do XYZ technique on him. That's not it, right? But that's not sparring. That's taking a specific skill set. In this case, it was footwork and kama alignment and keeping that arm in there as something that's troublesome for him, and being able to take that and progress with it, right? To develop it more and hone it more so that it holds up under greater speed, greater pressure, that kind of thing, and it doesn't break. But we're not just honing things. This goes back to that statement in the student creed, right? This helps to develop a greater belief in the system because I understand it more. I understand it when it's appropriate better. And I understand why this survived for centuries, right? And I'm probably going to be less willing to throw it away because nobody fights like that anymore. Or I'm going to do it my way. This is the way I do it. Or this doesn't. Moving to Ichimonji, that's too slow in today's world because fights are too fast. And then next thing I know, the person's bouncing around like we used to do in Taekwondo or whatever because they're trying to make it fast. But I look at the video of the guy doing it. He's just said it's too slow or whatever. And I'm like, well, of course you can't fucking use that against somebody that fast. Your kama's broken. You're not, your hips aren't in the right place. Your feet aren't in the right place. Yeah, you can't move fast from there. So that kama, when it was tested, broke, didn't fall apart. It just was not fast enough and usable enough. And so instead of asking, what the hell am I doing wrong? What am I missing? Or a teacher, I don't know if the person learned on their own or whatever. It's not my fault. Whatever, right? What do I say, Alan? Not my fault. Anyway, it didn't get caught. It didn't get checked. And so what did they do? Made an assumption. This doesn't work today. Okay. Well, then why the hell are you still using it? Now you're bouncing around like a Taekwondo guy. In a kama, you said doesn't work because it's too slow. I'm confused. All right? So this is important, right? If we truly don't believe that something will work, then find something that fucking does. But if it's lasted for centuries, not just in a classroom, what's behind it? And before I say people don't fight like that anymore, what am I basing that on? Well, see, people used to punch like this. How the hell do you know that? Because that's all you ever see in class? For beginners? For people with shitty basics? Because the kata that I've seen in this art, they don't all say that the uke ski. As a matter of fact, very few of them say that. It says the enemy is punching you in the face or they're stabbing you here or whatever, right? It doesn't say uke. It says teki or some other word that points to enemy or somebody who wants to fucking beat, break, or kill you. Not somebody who's trying to win a match. Right? And all those historical references that we keep seeing, these two met and had a match and this one won. That word match is a nice English translation to what actually fucking happened. It was not a modern 20th or 21st century English or American, Australian, New Zealand, wherever you can, right? Understanding of the word match, which for us generally means what, James? Contest, right? It's a match, right? Yeah, no. somebody wasn't going home today. I mean, they might, but they don't know it because they're in that long, deep sleep. Anyway, right. So, guys, this is not about knocking anything, knocking whatever. This is about thinking about, right? This is also not about going into my curriculum or whatever. The one thing that I and a small percentage of people within this art and the martial arts in general have that a lot of people don't is combat experience and experience with violence before entering the system. We know what it's like inside of not a fight bubble that keeps getting reproduced over and over again, but many different situations, environmental factors, different weapons, out already or hidden and could come out, multiple attackers or assailants or perpetrators, whatever. Okay. So again, this goes back and always will go back to what is it that you are trying to get out of your martial arts training? And I know how easy it is to say self-defense, the ability to protect myself. But if we get a hard on every time we think about getting promoted or when we get promoted, then maybe that's not the primary answer. Maybe it's an answer that we're willing to give because we don't want to be that guy that Sensei keeps talking about. There's no problem with wanting this, the benefit, the prize, right? Whatever it is. Just need to find a neighborhood where you can hang out, also known as a dojo, right? Where that's the thing. That's where you'll flourish much better. Because in every martial organization or system, not every school is focused on the same things, unless they're in an organization where it is to preserve the historical models, period. In which case, anybody in it and teaching it has no choice. Anyway, let me get back to things. Anything else pop up while I was on my little soapbox there?
No, sir.
All right. So let's continue to pretend that I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I think I know what I'm talking about. I have more than a handful of students who have, since I've been teaching, they've been corrections officers, military, average citizens that have had to use what Wando started training when he was 5 and came to me when he was 13. So that's 8 years. Really, really good at stuff. He was getting ready to test for his Nidan, came to an open house we did where I promised that if he came to this open house, you would learn 3 black belt level knife defense techniques. And they were right out of our Mod 5 to Shodan curriculum. And so he and his friend, ta-da, shows up. And he was really frustrated. We could not get him through the first technique because getting out of the way and not standing in one place and blocking was inconceivable. And I thought, there's no way this kid's going to sign. And sure enough, went all the way to Nidan, became a teacher. I think somewhere between Shodan and Nidan was when he and his 2 friends got jumped by a couple of guys in a mall parking lot near here, and one of the guys had a knife. So he took on the guy with the knife, and his other 2 friends handled the other guy or whatever. And later he said, I almost laughed because, like, it happened exactly the way you said it would happen. Like, how did you know that? Because attacks and fights go through phases. What matters is you recognizing patterns, what's going to tell you. I mean, of course, he was Shodan working on Nidan, right? So more capabilities than somebody who's only been in things for 3 months or a year or whatever. But you learn plenty of things, right? Primary rules for dealing with knife-wielding attackers: be too close or be too far, right? Blade awareness, all of those kind of things that we drilled the hell out of. So, of course, it felt easier. Of course, it felt like you knew what he was going to do next, because everything was based on principles and not on set techniques. You weren't trying to frickin' block something that could take a chunk out of your body. Anyway, all right. So, another section here. Okay, so that question takes us into another piece. Okay, but let's bring this back around. Right? Student says, "I believe in what I study," and I'm saying that I have a responsibility to give you something worthy of that belief. Okay, cool, right? Student says, "I'm ready to learn and advance," right? And I'm saying that I have a responsibility to know what you're advancing toward, not just what you're learning. And that brings us to the central idea that I want to explore during this episode. Right? All this leading up to here. And I think this will answer the question that came in. Because if we're going to take someone from where they are today toward capabilities they don't yet possess, not toward being able to do XYZ kata or being able to roll or whatever, right? Talking about capabilities, right? And we're going to deliberately select lessons, techniques, drills, experiences, challenges, reviews, and standards that progressively move them in that direction. Then we need something that shows us both where we're going. Right? We need a map, just like if we were going from one place to any other place that we're unfamiliar with. Okay? And that's the distinction I want to make. Right? That's the distinction that we should be looking at next. Because your curriculum, what you're studying, the techniques, the skills, that kind of thing, right? That's not supposed to be the destination. If that were the destination, then everybody that was in school, college, whatever, would still be in school or college, because they'd still be learning history, or they'd still be learning calculus, or they would still be learning engineering, or they would still be getting better at solving the math problems right, or that. No, the curriculum gets you to your fucking degree. It's just like school. This is no different than any other educational pursuit. The difference is this is not just a head thing like at academic school, and not just a hands-on how to fix an engine or solve a problem with motors or whatever as mechanics, or not just build bridges, or not just launch rockets into space. This is physical, mental, emotional, perceptual, right? So martial arts is a kind of a unique breed. And again, one of the other differences is if we get the math problems wrong, if we get something wrong in a history test, or we get a date wrong or whatever, right? We're not going to die. Let's never, ever, ever forget what martial means. I know lots of people training martial arts, and hell, in my classes, we have a good time. But having a good time in our classes is a balance. It's an antidote to the possible mental issues that could come up, because we're always talking about how fucking serious things are. And if you don't get this right, you will die. Yeah. That's a Nagato Sensei class. Well, it used to be anyway. He's softened a little bit. Ishizuka Sensei's class, whatever, right? We know that. We don't need to keep talking about it. But we can't get so lost in the fun and enjoyment that we forget why we're fucking there. So, curriculum is not supposed to be the destination. Curriculum is the map. The capabilities it progressively develops in you, that's the destination. And there's a very important difference between those two. And I can understand how this can be confusing because it took me a long time to figure this out. The reason it took me a long time to figure this out was because curriculum that I had gone through in previous martial arts turned out to be, we're going to teach beginners this stuff because that's easier. And then once they learn that, they get these belts, then they get this box, and they're going to work with these things because they're more difficult. So they're going to learn how to do these. And then that's going to get set aside. And then we're going to work on this. And so kata got longer, things got more complicated, things got more whatever, right? The problem with that in the real world is that here's my Trekkie geek side, right? Scotty, the engineer for the Enterprise, told Kirk one time when he messed up this more technologically advanced starship than the Enterprise. He's like, how'd you do that? And Scotty said, the more complicated the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the pipes. What that means in martial arts is the more complicated our shit is for us to do, the easier it is for him to throw a monkey in our wrench. Okay? It's like, how you get somebody that's really, really, really freaking good at nunchucks to hit themselves with it or to get screwed up so that you have an opening. Flick a coin at him or spit at him. And the moment he does that, you've disrupted his rhythm and his capability crumbles. Okay? And because he needs inertia and all that stuff, it's going to take him a little bit. It gives me time to run, gives me time to grab a hammer off a table, gives me whatever. Okay? Proficiency with our kihon, which is what every kata is made from, right? And I'm not talking about Ichimonji no kata, Jumonji no kata. No, those are smaller songs. They're just made up of a couple of basics. Basics are timing, distancing, angling, flow, perception, alignment, controlling those kind of things, of keeping the limb in there, controlling that space, right? To a beginner, right? We move away in Ichimonji, and so the lead arm is out there as a guard, right? It's to block anything that comes in or whatever, right? Except to an advanced practitioner, this is like a yin yang. Okay, it's not defense, deal with that, and then go charging back in. It's I should be able to use my Ichimonji in a way where he misses, and my hand is past his head, so I can hook from behind and punch him easier. Well, then you didn't move away. Sure I did. I moved out of range. I moved my targets out of range for both punches. That geometry is really important to learn, right? So he throws this one, and if he gets that second one off quickly because it looks like I'm right there, it won't land. So close enough to keep him committed to not change his style for these to be safe. And if I'm in that position, then, see, for a beginner, we would tell him to take up Jumonji because you're closer, right? Because this arm is going to get jammed up in here. Now, if I put my position, if I put my targets just out of reach and I stick this out here, I am closer to him than he is to me because he just fell short, but I'm close enough to grab, hit, and all that. That limb still stays out there. Nobody fights that way anymore, Sensei. Yeah, maybe that's why we should keep fighting that way and just understand it better because nobody fights that way, which means he will have to figure you out and develop a way to handle you under pressure on the fly when he doesn't have time. So it's not about style, and it's not about the problem that we all get into, and especially if we came from other martial arts, it's easy to get stuck there. Well, that's what the formula looks like, so that's must be how I'm supposed to fight. No, the formula looks like that, so you can study it and understand the logic that built it, and then apply that in many different ways. Okay. Anyway, so let's talk about this curriculum as the map, right? Let's work with that idea, right? Curriculum is the map, capabilities the destination, right? Now, if I hand you a list of cities, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, Paris, whatever, right? That may be useful information, but it isn't really a map. Okay. I mean, you might know where some of those places are, right? But it doesn't tell you how those places connect. It doesn't tell you which roads get you to anyone from anyone. It doesn't tell you which stop comes before which one for a reason. Right? Doesn't tell you what terrain you're going to cross. Doesn't tell you what you're going to need to cross the terrain. Because I named a bunch of places within my home state of Pennsylvania, but then I broadened out to the United States, but then I threw something in that was across an ocean. Okay. This is an analogy for training. Okay. But that list also doesn't tell you where you're ultimately trying to end up. It's just a list. And I think sometimes martial arts curricula can accidentally become the same thing. Here's Ichimonji, here's Omotogyaku, here's Onikudaki, here's Gansei Dainage, here's Mushadori, here's this kata, here's that weapon, here's the next belt requirement. Right? Now, again, none of those things are bad. Please don't. I know how easy it is for people to look at this like I'm like, what's the right answer? What's the wrong answer? And they're not bad. They matter. They matter a lot. But merely arranging them in a sequence does not automatically make them a developmental curriculum. Keyword, developmental. Because a developmental curriculum should answer more than what am I supposed to learn next? What should I be working on now? Okay? It should. Why? Why am I learning it this way now? What is this not only going to allow me to be able to do, but what is it also preparing me for so I'll be able to do it when I get down the line? Since it is possible to learn how to use the naginata, these martial arts, or pull weapons, is essentially a long staff with a short sword on the end of it. It is absolutely possible to learn a naginata just by learning naginata. But if a student first learns how to use a long staff, and then the student learns how to use a sword, one is striking at distance, mid-range, long range, blunt force trauma, balance of, a certain thing, right? The other one is learning how to fit into smaller spaces, learning how to allow a weapon to cut because that's its nature, or allow somebody to run into it or whatever. How to balance something that you're holding the short end and the heavy part is way out in front of you. Okay. Now, if we only ever work with Boken, maybe we learn that, maybe we don't. Okay. But actual swords, okay, that changes. Inertia, leverage, all those kind of things, right? With a long, it doesn't fucking matter how I hit him, right? It's blunt force all the way around and at the flat ends. But with a blade, that sliver of metal has to be lined up a certain way. Not only so it cuts, but also so it cuts through and doesn't get stuck. And then I have a different problem. Okay. I get that wrong. I may fillet something rather than take it off, right? I may just give him a brush burn or an abrasion. I may just shave some hair off his arm, right? But I also, if I'm really studying this thing, then I understand that on the opposite side of this sliver, this edge, right? There's the spine. I can hit with that, right? Or whatever, right? See, this is where dill comes in, because I can learn the staff, I can learn the sword, short sword, whatever, right? But when these two things get affixed together and it becomes a new weapon, it's not just a new weapon. That is now the ability to combine two different weapons together. And when I'm moving it around, being able to, hopefully, pick and choose. Is this a blunt force end moment? Is this a sharp moment? Is this right? But learning weapons like that, spear, naginata, whatever, now changes how we understand staff weapons in general. Okushakubo, Jo, Shobo, Tetsubo, right? Because now we study, I don't just learn the weapon, I have to learn how to defend against the weapon. Okay? Once I learn how to defend against the weapon, then I have to consider, okay, so we talk about, right, if we get this wrong, the attacker, chops off our blade or shortens our staff or whatever, right? Okay, well, you're not dead. Now what? Okay. What do you mean now what? He cut my weapon. It's short. Yeah. So 3 seconds ago you were doing bojutsu. Guess what you're doing now? Well, I don't know. Are you doing jojutsu? Are you doing hanbojutsu? Or are you doing something else? Because where he cuts it matters. And now that puts our bojutsu, jojutsu, and hanbojutsu into a different freaking context than just I'm learning this length of weapon, I'm learning that length of weapon, see, developmental. Right? What is this thing that I'm studying supposed to develop? What should I be capable of after going through this that I could not do before, that I could not see before, right? What kind of problems can I solve? That's the difference. Okay. Let's talk about 3 questions I think every student should be asking. All right. Talked about maybe one of these, but either way, right? So here's a simple way to look at it. Whenever you're working through a curriculum, whenever you're working through a rank level, a module, right? We use modules. Other people just use Q levels, down levels, whatever. Okay. When you're working through a kata, when you're working through a drill, whatever it is, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what am I learning? That's the content question. Okay. What's the technique? What's the skill? What's the drill? What's the principle being introduced? Okay. Second, what will I be able to do because I learned it? Other than demonstrate it, right? What will I be able to do because I learned it? That's the capability question. What problem does this help me solve? What situation can I now handle better? What new option do I have now that I've learned it? What weakness does this address? Right? What gap does it close? Right? And then the third question, how should I be different afterward? That's the developmental question, right? What changed in me? Did my timing improve? Did my awareness improve? Did I become better at recognizing openings? Did I become harder to hit? Did I become more efficient energy use wise? Right? Did I become less dependent on strength? Did I become calmer under pressure? Did I gain or acquire more options? Did I become better at making decisions? Right? That third question is huge. Right? I'll give you an example. We had a class a week or two ago, maybe. Had a student. This student has been in several martial arts. It is his nature to be fast and furious, right? It's very fast, right? But we're working on a technique where, and I wasn't even teaching the class. I ended up having to intercede to help a person character issue. Okay. Doesn't make him right, doesn't make him wrong. But by the end of class, he was like, oh, holy crap. I was resisting learning that thing because being in this position makes me feel like, oh, see, that's huge. Because if we don't ferret those things out as martial artists, as protectors, and a certain position triggers a defensive response, all of our shit could just go right out the window because we're going to do everything we can to not feel like this positioning, alignment, words, whatever, make me feel. Now, shit, no matter how good the armor is, no matter how good your punches are, kicks are, whatever, if an alignment between two bodies causes a panic attack, causes tension, whatever, you fucking lose. Everybody wants to learn the stuff on bodies and to defend beat on ours. But they think they're too damn cool and too damn perfect to look at understanding, personality, ego, those kind of things. Anyway, so what it came down to was we're working a throw count or something like that. And so the whole idea was, right, when he goes to move into this position, sink very, very low into this position, right, so that your hips are lower than his. And the student kept asking, why can't I just do it from up here? What's the benefit I get from doing down here? Great question. I'm explaining the benefits. Yeah, okay, but I can do that from up here, not without exerting more force and power. Yeah, but I can do it. That's not the question. The question is, can you do it against somebody twice your size? Can you do it against somebody who's bigger or heavier? For whatever reason, right? Down here, it neutralizes their strength. Yeah, but okay, look, okay. And what it came down to was he didn't like being in that lower position because it wasn't about him looking up. It was about him perceiving that he was being looked down on. Not physically, something else. Okay, great. Right. So we had to get through this. Got through it. Okay. Because I'm not anyway, we got through it. Okay. And then I said, look, we need to look at this from a strategic perspective because you're looking at it from you're in a weak, subservient position. I'm telling you, you're in a better strategic position and you own the power. Now you got to trust me enough to just do two things. Okay. Do you trust me? Fantastic. Now he's going to put himself in fighter position. You're going to put yourself in fighter position where you like to be. Okay. Feel good? Yes. Awesome. What can you see? What are the most obvious targets right in front of you? Here up. Awesome. Fantastic. Drop 4 inches. Just bend your knees, drop 4 inches. Can you still reach his face? Yes. Can you still reach his neck? Yes. Can you still reach those same targets you were going to reach before? Yes. What else can you reach? Well, solar plexus is right here, and I can get to the spleen and the liver. It's just right in front of me. Yeah. Okay. Can he get to the same targets on you? No, he's going to be punching the top of my head. Right? Yeah. The hard part. Okay. Can he get to your faces easily? I mean, if he did an uppercut or whatever. Right. He has to work harder. Fantastic. You've expanded options. His options got smaller, and to make some of them work, he has to work harder. Okay. Great. Drop 2 more inches. Just flex your knees, drop 2 more inches. Okay. Can you still reach his face? All those kind of, yes. Can you still reach those other things in the middle? Yes. What else can you reach? Well, his crotch is right there. His hip flexors are right there. Great. Does he still have access to all the other things? No. So who's in the dominant position and who's in the subservient position? And he had that moment. That is expanded capability through understanding the lesson and not just doing it or questioning it because we don't understand it. There's way too many people on the internet bashing shit they have no business talking about, not because they can't have an opinion. It's because they don't fucking understand the thing they're bashing. Conversely, there's a lot of people training in the martial arts. Good intentions. I think the guys that are bashing things have good intentions too. They don't express themselves well. But the people that are learning things, good intentioned, well-intentioned students, all that kind of stuff, doing what they're told to do, right? With the expectation that. But there's a lot of blind faith going on. Or there's a lot of, I don't know what questions to ask. That's why we do these things. That's why we do these KUDENs and Whiteboard Wednesdays and stuff. The things that get so little attention. Because most people just want to look at physical skill techniques. But they have no clue how important this level of understanding is to increase your capability with those skill techniques. Okay. Again, this third stage is huge. Okay. Because if I or you can answer the first question, but not the other two, then I may be learning content without necessarily developing understanding and, more importantly, capability. And that, my friends, is not the same thing. Okay? So let me know if you're watching live, think about something you're training right now. Maybe it's a kata, maybe it's a throw, maybe it's striking, a weapon, a drill, whatever, right? What do you think it is actually supposed to be developing in you? Now, my students should have a really easy time because I always pre-frame or reframe what it's supposed to be teaching. So I can get you to a level where I can have you do something and then ask you what it's supposed to be teaching before I tell you. Because I'm not creating disciples and clones. I'm creating people that can think for themselves when I'm not around. Right? I mentioned that earlier. Student puts their lives literally in the teacher's hands until the student is capable of doing it themselves. Not just the physical moves, but what the teacher sees, what he's looking for, how, not in other people, during this fight and bad thing. How is he assessing, right? How does he know which muscles to fire, how much, how little, whatever, right? What is it about this person and what tells are they giving, right? What information is this person gathering that you can't see in a step-by-step fucking kata? Or the slow demonstration that's being done in the dojo that you're going to copy, forgetting that you're only looking at it from whatever angle you are from the way they're demonstrating. And you can't see the rest of what's going on. You can't see beneath the skin, so you can't see how the muscles fire, in what order or in what combination. You can't feel balance. You can't see perspective or perception. There's so much. When you watch a physical technique, I don't give a shit if it's dojo or if it's on a video, you're only getting 10% at best. You got to solve for the rest. Okay. Anyway, right? Maybe whatever you're working on, right? What do you think it's actually supposed to be developing in you? Not just what are you doing, what is it developing? Okay, drop that in the comments, right? If something comes to mind, obviously, right? And if your answer is, I've never really thought about it that way, that's useful too. Okay, because that's exactly the shift in perspective I'm trying. That's what this episode's about. Okay, because the map is not just a list of skills and techniques and testing requirements. The map has to show relationships. A good map doesn't just show places. Think about any map. It shows relationships. This road leads to that road. This mountain range affects the route. This river creates a boundary. This road is faster. This road is safer. This one gets you there, but only under certain conditions. Right? A good curriculum should do the same thing. It should show how one lesson supports another. Before I continue on with that, James, questions, comments? My nose is itching. Not that you needed to know that. Anyway.
There's one question that came in, just asking for your thoughts on something, so I'm just going to hold it till the end for right now.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
See, look at you doing your job. We're just trying to keep things cohesive with the flow, right? So when people are listening to the recording and whatnot, we're not jumping topics all over the place. Everything needs to support. So I'm assuming that that's something that is outside current context.
Yeah, it was just about a rank.
Okay,
Talked
cool.
about
No
rank
worries.
thing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's out of context. Okay, so we'll talk about that at the end. No problem. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? No?
Nope, that's it for right now.
Okie dokie. See, this is that part of the episode where I start putting people to sleep, or I get it, right? For the longest time, I didn't think about things this way. Right? Just here's a box of toys. Learn these, get rank. Here's another box of toys. Learn these, get rank. Right? And in all honesty, in the Bujinkan for a long time, since I didn't, he had standards, but they weren't publicized. And often people got promoted because they had a good heart or whatever. There were no, right? There was a small percentage of schools that had a curriculum, a lesson plan, specific requirements, standards, those kind of things. But many, 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 I would venture to say most, did not. So this is out of a lot of people's wheelhouse. Okay? So again, think about an actual map, right? Because if I'm relating curriculum to a map, then we need to understand how a map works. Okay. And like I said, a good curriculum should do the same thing. I don't care whose curriculum it is, right? A good curriculum should do the same thing. Right? Again, it should show how one lesson connects to, supports, provides prerequisites for another one, whatever, right? Okay. It should show how earlier movement qualities get reused later. How a later lesson changes the meaning of something you learned before. Right? I just did that the other day. We were looking at a technique, or we've been heavy on drills here lately, and so my guys can probably relate to this, where we were doing this thing with Doko no Kamae. So instead of receiving with the lead arm and having this thing back here as a threat, like students initially learn it, what I had them doing was using that rear arm for uke nagash, but not moving off at an angle, staying inside. And then this lead hand, oh, it's just right there, right? Grab him, grab his face, whatever, right? And students that were good, they could demonstrate this thing and they could use it in the beginner doko kihon lessons. They knew how to do it, right? They know how to take this thing up, right? Low, this hand's lower, so he gets a direct line of sight to, look, I don't want to fight, but I will if I have to. Okay, calm down, relax. You come in here, I got something waiting for you, right? That's the beginner lesson, right? We're supposed to learn that. But put them into a developing intermediate received with this hand, and that automatically put this right there. And I had students from perspective doing this. So they received this okay, but they're in here. Because the answer at that level of where does the lead hand point in Doko no Kamae? And the answer is at his heart, at his core. Okay? It stays off the eye line, so he sees this. Okay? I give him an in, right? It's here, trying to calm him down, right? I'm trying to control those limbs and access and whatnot. But ultimately, I want him to look at this. Just like an Ichimonji, I want him to look right here. Because the feeling in Ichimonji is, if you touch me, I'll kill you. Okay? Just like, I don't want to fight, but I will if I have to. Okay? Or this one, right? Control you with my lead hand and my heart. Right? What that means is you get to come at me when I say it's okay. Right? But it's in here. And so heart. Right? Heart. Oh, well, that's easy. Okay? But in this lesson, this hand points at or accesses the heart of the problem in that moment. Just like in Mikyo, we have the Heart Sutra, which is the core principle idea, that which is principle and most important. Okay? So what's the opportunity, or what is that thing that requires my attention as soon as I do that? What's the next thing? It's either his rear hand, or if I've got the opportunity, throat, face, whatever, right? That's the heart. So this is what I'm talking about the meaning changes. We learned it in one context, but now we have this. Does that mean that from now on my hand can be wherever? No. Right? The beginner's level, right? And when I'm at a certain distance from him, that beginner lesson is still there. We're not throwing one away and replacing it with a new one. We're adding a nuance because now timing, distancing, relationship matters. And it's different from when he has to throw a stepping punch or has to overreach to get me and whatnot, right? What I'm pointing at and what I want him to look at is different. So, again, things change. They're supposed to, okay? Because the relationship changes. That's how fucking reality works. You know that. I know that. Okay? But for a long time, we all walk around with a Polaroid shot of set, fixed answers, expecting that reality will just twist and bend itself so that we can do whatever we believe should be right. We're all grown-ups, right? We all know reality doesn't give a flying shit or a rat's ass about what we believe, what we think should be, what we think is fair, whatever. Okay? Doesn't care. Right? We either accept reality as it is and learn how to navigate our ship better, storms and all, or we accept the fact that not only does reality not give a shit what we believe, what we think, what we know, whatever, okay? It is more than willing to slap our ass or worse when we're wrong. And no amount of egging or doing whatever it does to try to justify itself changes us. That's one of the meanings behind I will childish things, because now I'm doing adult things. And that is being able to make myself into a person that better navigates reality as it is and not the way I want it to be. Huh? So, what else is there? At certain stages, right? We learned that reviews, it's not just a review. Okay. I'm reviewing the stuff I learned because I'm prepping for, or I'm reviewing it to make sure I know it. Talk about that in a second. Okay. You hold on to that review thing. Okay. Because progress and development is not only forward. Okay. What else? How integration matters, right? We take something, we learn it, we hone it, we put it back into the system, and how that connects with other things and makes other things better, right? Just like we understand, right? No, any team is only as strong as the weakest link, just like a chain. Okay. So you don't want weak links on your fucking team, because they'll get people killed, right? Or they get you fired, or they get you thrown in, whatever, right? Don't do anything for friendship. I don't have friends that do dumb shit. I don't choose friends because they liked me and I liked them. I choose them because we have things in common, and that includes life goals and perspectives. And I mean, somebody's doing dumb shit and I can't get them to stop. Well, dude, I still like you, but you got to do your shit over there. Don't come to my house. I'm not going to jail. You know those jokes, right? A good friend, right? Bail, best friend, sit in a jail cell with you. Fuck you. A best friend wouldn't have compromised not just our friendship, would not have compromised my life by believing that. No. That's part of who the person becomes. These techniques, they don't just teach physical conflict. They also teach psychological ways of handling conflict, emotional and spiritual ways of handling conflict. Okay. Anyway, all right. What else? How the student's progressing from one kind of problem to a more difficult one. Right? A more complex problem. Multiple attackers, one or more weapons, confined environmental things, obstacles, things that normally people don't put in their dojo to get people to trip over, whatever. Okay. Clothing, 2 days out of every month. Tomorrow and Wednesday are our monthly street clothes days for this month. Okay. Students wear what they wear to work, or they wear to school, or they wear whatever, right? So they can see, oh shit, this type of pants, this type of material, right? This type of shoe, this type of, on this surface, shit, that changes things. Yeah. Don't always train in the dojo with tabi and tatami and dogi and whatever, right? That's where curriculum starts becoming developmental instead of merely sequential, right? Because sequence by itself is not enough. Okay. I can put 10 techniques. Okay? That doesn't mean that order develops anything other than somebody that can do those 10 techniques in that order. That's all it means. So what else does a map do? It tells you what not to worry about yet. Okay. It reduces unnecessary cognitive load. If I am hopping in my car here in East Central Pennsylvania and I'm going to drive to Florida, there are things that will happen along the way and things I'll encounter and traffic and merging and all that kind of stuff, but I don't have to worry about them for like 300 miles or an hour from now or whatever. That's something else a map does. And you know what? If I have a map of the United States, or if I have a map of the East Coast of the United States, there's a shit ton of that map that I don't have to worry about at all. if I'm driving to Florida. I still have the map because I might want to go to Wildwood, New Jersey, along the Atlantic Ocean, right? I might want to go to Ohio, whatever, right? Different directions, different. But there's a basic skill set, and as we get higher, at upper intermediate, advanced, senior level, people start teaching that kind of stuff. But even if you don't, it's being able to connect the dots and understand the curriculum from more than just the little box that we're working in. Because if we understand how it ties together, if we run into a technique up here and we go, I had a problem at this point right here. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I didn't like rolling, or I didn't like break falls, or I didn't like that particular counter strike, or that particular uke nagash. I had my favorites back then. Fuck. This one requires the one I thought I could just not have to worry about because I don't like it. And I'm not going to be able to do this one until I fix this problem. Okay. But a map reduces unnecessary, energy output, worries, thinking, whatever. Okay. If I'm traveling across the country, I don't need to worry about every state. I only need to worry about the path I'm on. Okay. You need to know what matters for the part of the journey you're on. Right. That's what a good beginner curriculum should do too. It should narrow the problem. Okay. Way too many beginners are going into class and they're training with everybody else, and there's black belts in there and whatever, and the teacher's just like, bleh, here you go. It's kind of like Happō in Japan. Not knocking Happō in Japan, but the lessons are at a certain level because people are going to only be there for what, week, 2 weeks? How many times do you train with the Gata sensei? 2 times, 4 times, whatever that amount of time. And then you train with that teacher, and then you train with that teacher, and but you're not spending any amount of time with a teacher in their perspective across weeks, months, years. So take it for what it's worth, right? Here's some ideas. Go home and figure out what skills and whatnot you need to develop so that you can do it like him. Not just copying what you think you saw. Oh, that's cool. I got that one. What did it take for him to be able to do over and over again from different angles? And things fell apart. Didn't really fall apart because it just, oh, but you could do this, but you could do this. You could do. It's kind of like when somebody, let's go back to Doko. When somebody learns, like, where does my hand go in Doko? Well, we start people here, okay? But Doko can be done with the hand over here, right? Can be done with the hand up here. Can be done, right? It's all over the place, right? So, but I've heard in the same class, in the same seminar, not ours, but right, you can do this, you can do this, you can do. Really doesn't matter, right? Just Doko, right? Does fucking matter, right? I have people put it here because it's still inside the fight, okay? But if I were farther away and he's not really picking up on it, and I go, oh, or I want to make it look obvious that I got something in my hand, but throw it at him, see, that goes in a different position, okay? But if I were doing uke nagashi with it, right, with the same hand and moving at a naname angle, and I catch it, well, now my Doko might look like this, right? So what are we talking about? We're talking about a snapshot in time. What's the purpose? Where we go, right? So again, not knocking what anybody's doing. I'm just trying to provide maybe some thoughts and guidance, okay? But a curriculum, a map, is in addition to helping you with connections and how things are related and how to get from one point to another point, right? It should also say, don't worry about everything yet. Here's the kind of problem you're learning to solve right now. Okay. In Mod 1, our students are working on the evasion and grab releases against the statistically most, or the statistically proven most common attacks that occur across 95 to 98% of assaults that crime reports show. But they're also learning it from a last second, oh shit perspective. Bad guy shows up, he's already got a hold of him, or the punch is already coming, or whatever, right? Now, of course, we're training very, very slowly, but it's an emergency survival situation. Okay? Mod 2 people are working on doing those things easier, but they have to deal with the what if. He's bigger, he's stronger. I don't have that kind of speed. I don't have that kind of strength. Great. So what we're going to do is we're going to use long range defensive angling to break that advantage that he has. And that should allow you to be able to do that grip release or whatever with less energy. Or now they're learning yakute and things like that. So what you're learning how to do is to disrupt his structure in a way that destabilizes him and breaks his strength, breaks his speed, neutralizes any kind of skill advantage he has and whatnot. And you're going to affect his entire body from one point of contact at the end of an arm. Or you're going to kick him from long range, you're going to punch him from long, whatever, right? It's about long range. I can't let this guy touch me. Mod 3 is just the opposite. How do I disrupt him sooner? But see, why not switch those two? Why don't you do this one first and that one? Because the person who's working on Mod 3 stuff needs to have more and better control of their body, and they need to be able to perceive things better and soon so they can act on them, so they can keep them from getting into a position where strength, speed, whatever matters. What if they can't? That's what Mod 2 is for. If they can't move in, then they move out. Yeah, what if the guy already gets a hold of you? That's what Mod 1 is stuff is for. This is not sequential like beginner, intermediate. No. Context. If you got the jump on you, guess what? You're using techniques we gave you in Mod 1. Techniques given in Mod 1 are not beginner techniques. They're techniques that we can give to beginners because they suit a certain context, but they don't go away. Because if he gets the jump on me and I'm surprised, I can't do long distance. I can't preemptively initiate. I can't do any of that shit. I'm in a condition where the techniques we give to people in Mod 1 are perfectly suited. If I can't get the jump on him, I'm going to make him have to fight harder to get at me. Right? I can't back up. Maybe the door's on the other side of him. I need to go first. So these are not easy, harder, impossible. It's not that kind of thing. Okay? We don't know where on the map we might have to go. So everything matters. Okay? Just, again, we don't worry about everything. At each level, we're working on very specific things. In this case, what I'm talking about is the kind of problem that the student is learning to solve right now. But if everything's just thrown together, then we can't answer that question. Because the problem is, I don't know this technique, so I have to learn it. That's not step 1, that's step 0. I have to learn the technique so I can start exploring what that technique is teaching me about solving a particular problem. Okay. It's also showing me here are the tools that matter right now. Here's what success looks like right now. That's not limiting the student. That's giving them a usable map. Later, the map expands. The problem gets more complicated. The student gets more capable. Right? And they can now handle information that would have overwhelmed them earlier. That development. Okay? Remember earlier I said is not the destination, right? Well, here's where things can go wrong. If the student start like the destination, then advancement becomes, I finished that page, I checked off that technique, I learned that kata, I passed that test, I got that belt, right? And again, those can all matter. They can all matter. But if we stop there, we can confuse progress through the curriculum with progress in capability. And those are not automatically the same thing, right? You can cover more curriculum without being proportionally more capable. You can accumulate more techniques without becoming better at solving unfamiliar problems. I know a lot of people who are really, really good at doing the kata. But if we were to slip in a haymaker or a jab, jab, right cross or uppercut combination, they probably wouldn't be doing taijutsu. You can earn rank without becoming more efficient. You can even become very good at demonstrating the material in prescribed conditions without becoming equally good at adapting when those conditions change. My students all know, and the closer they get to black belt, the closer they get to Nidan, I get conspiratorial. What I mean by that is, let's say James is in class, and I'm going to be looking at somebody for one of those black belt levels, and I'll go, hey, every chance you get, work with them. Not all the time to make it obvious, but every chance you get, right? And then when you're working with them, whatever we're working on, just every once in a while, throw the wrong attack. Because if that student can at least deal with what's coming in, reset to kamae, and then from over there go, dude, it was supposed to be a grab, not a front kick. And then James can blow that off and go, shit, sorry, brain glitch, right? How else can I test whether or not the person is actually adaptable if all I ever have them do is copy demonstrated techniques or go to the opposite extreme and now we're just going to do sparring? Well, shit, in one context, he's looking for anything. In the other context, he's looking for something specific. When in both situations, he should be looking for something specific that tells him what's probable, but adaptive to being able to handle whatever gets thrown, at least enough to escape into something that looks as close to kamae as possible. Otherwise, why fucking learn how to do kamae if you're not going to do it when the bad shit happens, right? Okay, so again, that's one of the problems we've been circling around in recent episodes. So tonight's prescription is not to throw out rank. It's not to throw out kata. It's not to throw away curriculum. It's to stop confusing those things with the destination. Right? What do people think of, or what do they say out loud when they go, wow, you're a black belt in somebody's ass, or that person just tied that belt color with an assumption of what your capabilities are supposed to be. Somebody who's not even in the art. The question is, can we live up to what they think we're able to do? Okay? And this is where I think that the map should be designed backwards from the destination. Curriculum are put together like, okay, here's what we're going to give beginners. Here's what we're going to give the next one. Here's what we're going to give the next one. I didn't make mine that way. I started with capabilities and then reverse engineered it. Okay. How many punches, how many tsuki, how many whatever, right? Should a student have done approximately, right? By the time they become a shodan? In class and in practice. 100, 1,000, whatever, right? How many shuto should they have, right? So that is, they don't have to think about, they need a shuto. There's a target. They don't have to think about where their fingers go. They don't have to think about how to produce it. They don't have to think about which muscles fire so this thing doesn't rock, slide, fold, whatever. They can take this away and put that up against a body. Income, swing away. this won't fold, this won't fold, this won't collapse, and they won't get punched. Because if Nidon in my curriculum is being able to handle the average jackwagon on the street who's having a moment and throws whatever he wants, and I expect a student to be able to string their basics together in an unbroken flow against whatever he's throwing using taijutsu only, then what do they have to learn before that to be able to live up to that at that rank? Not they know the Gyokoryu Joryaku no Maki kata. They know some of them. Later on, we'll take them through those kata, because then we'll be working on what's the difference between the Gyokoryu strategic approach to handling a situation as opposed to the Kukishinden or the Tagagi Yoshin. Why do I need to know that? Well, because if I'm using one frickin' approach and I can't get in on this guy, it'd be nice to know that I can change 8 more times. Not techniques, strategic approaches. That's different. That's capability. Right? So, again, what does a student eventually need to be capable of? Right? What kind of perception do they need? What do they need to be able to spot? Right? What patterns do they need to be able to recognize? What decisions do they need to be able to make? Right? What physical skills do they need? That's the obvious one that most people get, right? What habits do they need? What habits do they have to get rid of, or that they will get them killed? What experiences do they need? What misunderstandings do they need to outgrow? Right? What kind of problems do they need to encounter between now and then? Okay? Then I can ask, what should come first? What should come later? What should be revisited? What should be tested under pressure and how? What should be integrated? When? What should eventually become automatic? Right? That's a very different way to think about curriculum than which techniques belong in our orange belt. Right? So anyway, I think we're going to stop this. I'll open it up to questions and whatnot. Don't forget, like, share, leave comments as long as they're respectful. But we're going to pick this up again next week. Hopefully this is helpful. Actually, you know what? Let me do one more thing. Do I have it? I'm going to show you something here. This is important. There we go. I do have it. Notebook. Okay, so some of you guys already know this because you picked up like the Done For You curriculum blueprint. I've got these workbooks for students. Just shift over here quickly, right? I mentioned this earlier, and I probably should handle this before we move everything down the line. So I got these workbooks, and these are through the modules, the different things that we were talking about, right? So every module has one. Every module has 3 belt levels that they go through, kind of a beginner, intermediate, advanced level of its own. That's through the Q levels, and then into the black belt levels, there's other things as well. But so turn this so I know those of you who are on audio only, no big deal. I'm going to describe it. So right, we've got main pages and whatnot. There's even a little what do you call them? Promotion thing in here. But like I said, it matters, right? So my projected graduation dates are, and so we're moving out into these things, right? So this is a module 2 one. Yeah. So either way, right? It all works out. Okay. So got these other things worked in. Just a little thing about the module itself. Novice levels, those kind of things. So we've got skill pages, right? Just individual skills. And then we've got proficiency drills. We've got strike defenses. We've got grab defenses. And then it moves into belt level graduation requirements, those kind of things. And then I've got some extra worksheets, support materials. There's write-up and description, at least for that level. Understanding for Doko no Kamae, a Kamae development worksheet, those kind of things, right? But earlier I said that curriculum shouldn't just be forward-facing, because when folks went through Mod 1 in my curriculum, they were only in Mod 1 for about 6 months, 2 months for every belt level, which means they had at most 6 months, 1 to 6 months worth of experience, coordination, understanding, or whatever of the techniques they were learning. And the principles that we were presenting there. Okay. Mod 2 gave them more principles, more strategic understanding and whatnot, right? So that needs to be reverse. It needs to be it needs to be applied to the stuff that they learned in the past to bring those things up to a higher capability level. So, I don't know if you can see this or not, but try to get this a little bit closer. Not that it's going to matter a whole lot for the what do you call them? The audio only people. But let's look at the kamae here, right? Long range defensive kamae. I'll just pull it away here. This is just easier for me, right? So we've got Gyoko Ryu Ichimonji no kamae, not module 1 form, right? Ichimonji in module 1 is the general one that you saw in the early ninjutsu books by Stephen Hayes and Hatsumi Sensei and whatnot, right? Gyoko Ryu Shoshi no kamae, used for the Sanshin no kata. Koto Ryu Seigan no kamae, the module 1 form. Kukishino Ryu Doko no kamae, that's debatable. In my notes, that's where it comes from, but Koto Ryu uses something like it. It's just not named. Either way, I'm not going to go into that. Even Seno Sensei, in the last bunch of years before he died, he's like, we used to do Doko a lot. And I don't know why we stopped, but we're going to keep practicing, right? But there's another line down here. Review all previous with improvement. That is a testing standard in this module. And every module, in module 3, it'll say Gyoko Ryu, Ichimonji no, what does it say? Gyoko Ryu Jumonji no kata. It says Kukishinden Kosei no kamae. And it says Koto Ryu Bobi no kamae. And then it will say all previous with improvement. The kamae requires, or the curriculum requires, all previous techniques, strikes, all that kind of stuff, to be elevated to the new level of understanding. Body movement skills. Yeah, so there's, like I said, there's strikes, there's all that kind of stuff. And Kyusho, right? Review previous with improvement. And then it adds more. All right? So it's not just forward facing. We don't leave the older shit. It's not shit. We don't leave that in that state so that we will forever be doing Mod 1 techniques, no matter what our rank, as though we're still in Mod 1. Okay? As a matter of fact, I took a Mod 1 technique a couple of classes ago and showed everybody that they were doing the same one over and over again, whether it was in the curriculum or not. Mod 1 is just, it's got this thing and we come around and pop it off of it, go to kamae or do a follow-up or whatever, right? Mod 2, we stretch him out. He's got a hold of this thing and then break that grip, and then we can take advantage of it or just return to kamae. Mod 3, catch this thing, pop it off in a certain direction so that I can catch him for a ganseki or a musou dori or whatever, right? Module 4, we do the same one against double grab, and we have to do 2 completely different teihodoki on both sides, but they both get done in a way that produces an armbar and a forward throw in the active, but we don't actually break our hands free from their thing, because teihodoki, right, hand escapes, is not in the advancing levels. It's not about freeing your hands, because when he grabs a hold of me, I know exactly where his hands are. I don't want him to let go. Right? And if I don't need my hands to throw him, like I learned in Mod 3, ganseki and osotonagi and stuff, right, then he's free to hold on. because he can't hurt me with those hands. Say, let's go. And the harder he holds on, the better the throw works. So the question really isn't about breaking the hands free. It's getting myself free, even if my wrists are grabbed. That's capability. It's not just executing textbook techniques, or in this case, scroll techniques. So anyway, right? So the curriculum is forward-facing. You need to learn these things so that you'll be able to do those things. But what if these things taught you that will make these things better, more powerful? How now can you integrate that stuff that you thought was back there? How do you integrate that into this stuff? I just showed Trinity tonight how to do the mod 1 block Shakoken to the jaw to knock him out thing in one move from Happō, because she's in mod 4. And now it's not a block. It's an arm shocking technique that destabilizes him, but I'm going to hit his arm and his jaw at the same time. So if he doesn't drop like a sack of shit because I just knocked him out, well, then my arm is in position to do a ganseki, to do a mushadori, to. Okay? So that's integration. Anyway, James, what do we have? Let's wrap this up. I know there was another question, but we'll handle any other questions about this. Was this helpful to anyone? Did this, I don't know, was it helpful? Because, I mean, here's the thing. If you're not one of my students, you can do whatever you want. Okay? But if we're talking about capability, okay, how is your stuff preparing you to deal with a 250-pound MMA fighter who's used to getting hit in the head a lot? How is it preparing you to deal with the thug or the street guy or whatever who has zero fucking life value on himself and even less on you and will not stop unless you break him? And how do you know without running out and just testing it? There was somebody in the Bujinkan years ago, and a lot of people are glad that he's not. I'm connected to him, but whatever. But he used to admit that like every weekend he'd go out and get into fights just to test his stuff. Then he would say, well, I don't recommend that for everybody, but that's how I, yeah, no, that's how Bujinkan got a bad fucking reputation from some people along the way. But either way, all right. What do we got, James?
Same person asked the question, just had another comment.
Okay.
Any technique I am working on is for me, taking a concept and a principle shown to me and adapting my body and mind to the concept and principle. As this is done, it creates a foundation and solidifies a broader base to develop. As time goes on, these things become a natural part of my expression of the art.
For what purpose? I mean, if it's just to learn a martial art, then okay. That's my question. For what purpose? If it's to learn a martial art, then your curriculum and your training method can be any way and anything that you want. I'm cool with it. Huh? But if we are trying to become capable of dealing with a physical attack, assumptions are not going to cut it. Like James said earlier, right? He started watching CCTV footage and stuff like that and went, uh-oh, shit wasn't computing, right? So obviously we're not throwing people into that kind of thing. But after fifth dan, right, you obviously proved that you can get away from something unseen, single attack, coming in a predictable path. Awesome. Okay. Now we're going to continue to hone that so that, because, who's going to attack you with a shinai from behind? Oh, I don't know, maybe somebody, right? And they could come at you with something overhead or whatever. But it's been my experience as a former cop and security person and whatnot that they could grab you from anywhere around you, grab you by the clothing, the hair, or whatever, and just start sticking a knife in you. So since we've entered the gate of being able to sense unseen danger, unheard danger from behind, great. What forms can that danger take? Kotoryu has that stuff in it. Shinden Furoryu has that in it. Okay? Shinden Furoryu, you have to be able to go from, there's one kata where there's an attack coming in from Daijodan with a sword. Again, it's one of the classical ones. You're sitting in Fudoza, and you don't just sense it, right? See, a lot of people stop, then they don't even think about the sake stuff after they got their fifth dan, because I got my fifth dan, right? But there's plenty of stuff in the scrolls for that. So sword comes in, not only do you have to detect it, but you have to be able to stand up from Fudoza on a rear naname angle, so he ends up in front of you, and you ended up in a diagonal behind him. And then there's proceeding from there and whatnot. Kotoryu, there's stab to the back, but that stab could be in on your spine directly. It could be to the right kidney, to the left kidney, whatever, right? Honing the sake skill isn't just being able to detect danger. It's being able to sense where it's coming from. Because if he's stabbing at my right kidney and I step to my right, well, now my spine or my left kidney just got impaled. If he's coming at my right kidney, I need to step left because that's the shortest path, right, to him missing. That's developmental capability. Again, the question is, I understand what you're doing, and I understand that it sounds developmental, and it is. But the question is developmental for what? If it's your expression of the art, and that doesn't involve real world martial stuff, then all is good. As long as your curriculum gets you to where you want to go based on your expression, your desires, whatever, even if it's belt rank, as long as the curriculum does that, then fantastic. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about capability, not just abilities. They're not the same. Okay. Anyway, so, but again, we can still be friends. It's all cool. Okay. I just live around and work and I'm in the realm of like people that need this stuff every day. And that's where I got my start. Right. I came at personal development through the back door in this art because I didn't enter it. I didn't enter it for rank, right? Didn't get my first rank in this art for 2 years. I was a white belt for 2 years. Didn't care. All right. But again, that's me. This is not about me making other people clones of me. Right. So what was the other question? What was the question about rank?
He said in answer to your question, for him it is to live well, to meet life head on. It's more than fighting, but mastering life.
Well, there you go. Cool. Awesome. So then the question that you would need to ask yourself is, how is this accomplishing that? And how are you better at that now than you were when you first got started? You don't need to answer that for me. This is not for me. This is for you. Because the curriculum gets you from point A to point Z. So where are you? Okay. Again, don't answer that for me. I don't need an answer. Everybody should be answering these things for themselves. That's how you know you have the right curriculum for you. That's how you know you can answer the question, I believe in what I study. Right? It's how you know you're advancing and not just accumulating. Okay? So, anybody else? Anything else?
Just his other one that was, I have learned to see rank as a kind of signpost. The belt represents as sort of a snapshot of the bare minimum of knowledge that even on your worst day that you can pull from. It is the new starting point. Scott Bragg, I think, described it best when he said, "Your belt is so I can know where to start you that day." It's sort of a bookmark. It doesn't necessarily mean you're, quote, good at self defense or even a good person, which is what we should all try to be. We should all be attempting to be our best selves. I tend to like this outlook. Your thoughts on
Cool.
this?
Cool. Yeah. No, my teachers always told me that, we understand that you get that warm, fuzzy feeling when you got promoted, but your belt's not for you. Your belt's for your teacher. Because your teacher should be able to look at your belt color, know what you should know, what you're working on, and where you're going. And that's important for the corrections that they give you for what you're working on. And they don't dogpile on you with 15 corrections and leave you feeling like you're never going to figure this out. Okay. I tend to not dogpile on the physical mistakes, but I will punch the shit out of somebody's ego because they're not listening, they're not paying attention, or I don't know what the hell they're doing. They're grabbing onto one thing that was said, and that becomes everything, right? Sometimes students just need to be shaken awake. And that goes for the teacher. The teacher should always be training as well, right? I have my students know about a student creed, the vows of intention, and the warrior code of action. Okay. I'll have to reprint it out and hang it up again. We didn't have it up, or we didn't have it up in a way that most students could see it. But I developed a master's creed way back in the day. And it's simple. It says, the day I cease to be a student is the day I'm no longer fit to be a teacher. And that goes right along with what the Japanese master teacher is always talking about when they're revisiting the scrolls, they're revisiting the Kihon, whatever. Lower level students would go, what the hell you mean revisiting? You should know that by now. No, I just explained this. From this new level, they're going to relook at these things with the question, what am I missing? And then when they see something new, they're going to go, guess I need to explore that. Guess I need to practice from that perspective. Guess I need to, because it increases capability. But yeah, I was really offended when I first heard that the belt wasn't for me. It was for my teacher. It was mine. See, because it's really easy to say that it's an indicator, it's a signpost or whatever. But the way we do things, the way we think about it, the way we relate to it, not the way we talk to others. Right? Because, my black belts, right around, around Christmas, we'll wear red belts or white belts to class. Right? And students are like, especially if I'm wearing a white belt, they go, Sensei, every once in a while I get a student that goes, Sensei, were you demoted? Yep. No, you're all good. Or a red belt or whatever, because it's not the belt. Right? One of the first poems I ever wrote when I became a student is hard. That was a vow I made to myself. I hung it in my personal training area. Right? As a matter of fact, it's in the dojo again, isn't it? Because I think I reprinted it because I'd done it in calligraphy and all that, right? But there's a nin symbol on it, and underneath it, it says, my art is in my head and in my heart, not around my waist. But again, that's me, right? I'll do me. I'll help students to the best of my ability who come to me, but you do you. Nobody can tell you that that's right or wrong. Okay? I'm only laying this out like you don't drive around and get hit with detours or get lost as much if you have a friggin' map. But to use a map properly, I have to have index points. You know where I'm starting, and where I'm going, where I'm passing through, right? That kind of thing. And I think if we can equate curriculum to being like a map and not just lists of things, like a checklist. Got that one, got that one. Oh, got to get that one. It might work better. But I could be so wrong. I'm so far in left field. I'm parking cars in the parking lot. But hey, here we are, right? Next week, we're going to dive deeper into this, right? Same concept, but we're going to take it down a level to where we go inside the curriculum a little bit more to understand. And we're going to, for those students, for those people that are students of mine, or that you've been in my programs, or you've been with KUDEN or Whiteboard Wednesday for a while, you're going to be familiar with things like the 5Ds and whatnot. Yeah, we're going to look at that from a developmental progression as well, capabilities progression as well. So I think we're going to do that one next one. If not, that'll be held off for another one. But we're going to be moving through this from a prescription kind of thing, like a doctor prescribing things, right? So the previous couple of episodes highlighted problems and things that can confuse us or derail us or whatever, including the training itself, if we're not careful. So I'm kind of done with that, right? And what I want to focus on, I did today, and I want to focus moving forward, is how to ramp up progress and that kind of thing. Okay. I'll leave you with a closing thought. Again, Trinity was in. She is off all day tomorrow, so she lives like an hour and a half away from me and stuff. And so she comes in once or twice a week, and she tries to get in as many classes as possible. My daughter, and so she worked today, came in, whatever, was actually able to get a class in, and then I was kind of putting all the backstop stuff for this, and so she had to jump online and do one of her courses that she's taking. She's between a master's and a doctorate degree. She hasn't formally started the doctorate. She's just taking these extra courses to improve her ability within the intelligence world. Anyway, so she there was a guest instructor in the class, and she's like, oh, I don't mind guest instructors, but like this one is not in my field. So I'm going to be tested on the presentation, but do you have one of those books that we've been talking about that I could read? So I gave her one, 100 Laws of Warfare, something like that, 100 Rules of Warfare. And there was another one. And then I pulled out 2 from one of the master instructors that she likes. And she opens this thing up, and she points at the table of contents, right? And it'd be just like pointing at the 8 gates, or the Togakude to use 18 levels, right? And she goes, right here. Really want to just point this out to people in class, right? Here's all the levels of training, and Ninpo Taijutsu is just one. But that's where most people want to put all of their attention, but still say that they're doing all of this stuff. I just smiled and said, I know. Most people either don't have an idea or don't want to have an idea, because that's the easiest thing to manage. Okay. This is either too damn hard, or it's going to take too damn long. And she's like, I'm glad I'm 25, because it's going to take a while. But here we are, right? So anyway, she didn't jump on last minute, did she?
Not that I saw.
No? Okay. All right. Anyway, anything else? Anything else I need to address before we wrap this up?
He just said thank you for your insights. I very much enjoyed this session.
Cool. Awesome. I did too. I appreciate it. All right. So I will see students tomorrow in class, still carrying on with drills. So for Whiteboard Wednesday this week, I have decided that I'm going to look at one particular Kihon Gata that is highly, highly, highly misunderstood. As a matter of fact, I just finished a longer article on it. It'll be posted on the blog here in a couple of days. And I'm also making a proficiency. I'm starting a series of proficiency programs on each of these things. Like in this case, it is Hicho no Kamae and Hicho no Kata. Okay. It is one of the most highly misunderstood. So I haven't exactly picked what topics and drills and stuff we're doing in the Shinobi Kai Masterclass tomorrow, but Whiteboard Wednesday, it's going to be on Hicho no Kamae, Hicho no Kata, that correlation and relationship, and developmental capability things that come out of what people try to hold as a sacred, unchangeable thing, right? And then, of course, our Friday Masterclass, it's going to be drills and things working off of Hicho no Kata, right? It's going to be surprising. People will be surprised as to what we come up with because it is not going to be Henka. It's going to be about what Hatsumi Sensei said it was about and what the Gyokoryu points to, which has very little to do with that sequence. I know, weird, huh? Anyway, but we got to give beginners something to start with. But anyway, so that's for the rest of the week. Otherwise, either see you in class, I'll see you on Whiteboard Wednesday, or I'll see you next week on KUDEN.